Show. I'm Giancarlo Lino, joined as always here, John Freeman Nelson from Atlanta. And we got to talk about something interesting here because Atlanta, Toronto, interesting stuff going on. But we'll first go with Toronto. Overreaction a little bit with the loss from Philadelphia by some. Is this as bad as people are making it out to be?
Well, when you think when you think you have fixed your defensive problems and you haven't, and it ends up 3, well, and also Philadelphia being the top team in the East. I mean, it's it is what it is against Philly, and you're not the same offensively when you don't have Bernardeschi and Insigne in the lineup at the same time. You're not the same team. You've also had like 11 gazillion injuries. Michael Bradley was been injured. I think Michael Bradley was turning into like an assistant coach for his dad last time out. I mean, the injuries up top have not helped you. And when you're injured up top and you can't score, when you don't have your midfield at full song and you're trying to figure out what your relationships are going to be, and the easiest thing for folks to do is just surround Bernardeschi and sit there, and it's like, okay, don't get him the ball. And then you have a back line that is as porous as it is, and it turns Sean Johnson into the guy at at hockey practice who's, you got all the guys in the shoot around in the arc and he's trying to save as many of them as possible. Something's going to get in the net. I mean, overreaction is kind of part of who we are anyway, but there are a lot of problems in Toronto right now. And it will be interesting for me to determine, it's going to be interesting for me to see what it looks like in the January window and how you try to address it all over. I mean, in the June window, and how you try to address it all over again.
Perfect timing here as we welcome in Carmen Sacco, master coach of the York Lions, in the basement. It looks like at York University. Carmen, how you doing?
Absolutely average. How are you?
Doing great. They couldn't put you up in like the executive suite, top floor, in one of the buildings over there. They put you in the basement under the stadium.
We're scumbuckets here. Yeah, this is but they kind of painted it for us. We just finished some individual meetings with the women's program, and yeah, they kind of brought mice spray to come down into our office, and they only had to fight off a few rats and raccoons. But they all made it out safe, so we're good.
Carmen, we'll start off
Toronto, and something's wrong with Toronto.
Is that overreaction you feel from like TFC faithful that have jumped to conclusion here that they get Insigne back, he scores, but it looks like the same old team now, losing games?
I mean, I guess they need to address the defending. They got rid of Lucas, who, to be honest, was very good for Toronto. I thought he was a good soldier for Toronto. He did well. Hedges is kind of, aged, a little bit older. Not sure how much he's invested in everything that's going on. But yeah, at some point they got to look at themselves and talk about the signings that they made, not only within the league, but outside the league. And especially to address their defensive woes. And the reality is in a Bob Bradley system, like we saw many times over LAFC, and they had with Zimmerman, and he was left 1v1, 2v2, with the opposite center back, but they had center backs that could handle that. And in their system, where Luria and the Italian Peralta gets forward, they're left alone a lot in transition situations, and they're more tactical center backs in a low block or a middle block, rather than individual center backs where they have to deal with, defending for 40 yards or 50 yards of the field. It's difficult for them because that's not what it's not so much in their locker right now. But yeah, I think they need to look at themselves, and I think that they are transitioning, and Bob is realizing what he had and doesn't have. And let's be fair, it's not his team just yet. It's kind of evolving into his team, and nine spots for the playoff or eight. It's a new type of system right now, and I think Toronto, they may limp themselves in, but when Bob Bradley kind of finds the team that he needs, I think he'll be fine. I think that this team will be fine in the playoffs, and I think that a lot of teams are going to be afraid to play them. But yeah, have they addressed the number 9 with CJ Sapong? Or is he just going to be another, one of those situations that didn't work? I mean, again, CJ Sapong is, middle or lower 30s, has proven in this league, not lately, mind you, has proven in this league that he can score goals. But I don't think it's by accident that he's gone to, 3 teams in the last year.
Yeah. Well, I guess they can be thankful that Toronto Maple Leafs are dominating the news cycle here and attention, because then I think it would be even worse with fans jumping to conclusion. But John, a team that's rolling right now, Atlanta, pick up a win there, 2-1 over Chicago. Give us your thoughts on what went down there.
Well, I mean, Chicago, and I think a lot of folks are sleeping on Ezra Hendrickson right now. And I think that he probably likes it that way. I think Chicago is a lot better than folks are giving him credit, especially defensively. Chicago made it very uncomfortable for Atlanta in the second half. And the easy way to do that is try and make it difficult for a not 100% Thiago Almada to try and function. And they did exactly that. And it just seemed like Atlanta in the match against Chicago, they were having problems turning the engine over. I mean, there was some passing that it was against type, where if Atlanta United is really working things through with their system, it's very short passes, very, very quick, advancing quickly. You're trying to see a lot of long passes that Chicago was forcing them into interceptions. And I think there were 40 instances of that. Our friends at Major League Soccer came up with a number, and I think it was 40 times that they had been turned over. 20 times they'd been turned over within 40 yards of goal. And when that happens, especially in the second half, you create chances for Chicago, and that did exactly that, because they get a goal in the 90th minute. And then for the second time this year, Atlanta United scores at 90+9 off a ball that hits Haile Selassie not once but twice for an own goal. But as coach knows, there are games where you play great and you come away with nothing. There are games where you play average, you come away with a point. There are games where you play like ish, and one moment happens and you come away with a win. I think that when you look at the Chicago match specifically, you had a great start. Giacomakis gets injured in the 60th. Thiago's not 100%. Chicago takes over defensively. They score. You get a moment. Bottom line is, at the end of the day, you made your way through that 90 minutes. You got the full points. You're third in the East. You move on, and you focus on Nashville after Open Cup in the midweek, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that lineup there. You won't have Quentin Westberg. You won't have Yorgos Giacomakis. And what's it going to look like, considering that you played 120 minutes in the midweek and you've got to travel to Nashville, and you were the last match of last competition week. You play in the midweek, and you're the first match of the weekend this weekend against Nashville. I'd love to know who the schedule maker was that figured that one out. So it's going to be an interesting challenge for Atlanta, but Nashville has yet to figure out, outside of Hani Mukhtar, how to score. And, it probably is not going to be a match that is going to set the world on fire when it comes to the first match of the weekend. But right now, hey, like I said, coach knows this more than anybody. You got games where you play great, you get nothing. And there are matches where you don't play great, you come away with something. That's what happened with Atlanta on the weekend.
And just speaking on that, we'll transition a little bit, because there were a lot of upsets in the Canadian Championship, and John talking about like Open Cup and competition. This is exciting time here in Canada soccer, because Carmen, Vaughan, Montreal, although you guys didn't get the win there, you showed that, there's a competition in the semi-pro ranks, that some of these guys could be making it onto that next level. Maybe it's a CPL. They deserve another look. So what did you see out of your group and the way they were able to play against Montreal?
I mean, I think that I'm disappointed, to be honest with you. And maybe that I didn't get it right in certain situations, knowing that I wouldn't get it right in certain situations because of the spaces that we decided to give up. But in transition, we had 2 or 3 incredible opportunities to actually score the first goal. And that would have changed things. But yeah, I mean, that's par for the course. That's what we're trying to develop here. And you know what? It's not a question of MLS teams not getting it right or CPL teams not getting it right, but it's a question. It's a question of, you know, there are a lot of good players in League One, and I'm sure there's a lot of good players playing in the USL League One as well, and that could play at this level. And we're going to see it again in the Open Cup. We saw Sacramento's run last year. And you saw it in TSS Rovers versus Valor. You know, you get it right physically, you get it right technically and tactically, things can happen. You know, you're 3 goals down before blink. And I think that's par for the course. And I think that it's inherent in the system. It's being at the right place at the right time for a lot of these players. And then Clyde Chella, who did a really good job against Montreal, just got picked up by Winnipeg and now is back into the CPL. And there's a lot of players of that ilk. You know, Omar Marzouk scores one of those goals in transition. He would probably get picked up by one of the CPL teams. Or, you know, Raheem Rose penetrates well, gets those actions, misses the post by 2-3 inches. These are situations where, you know, you have to be at your best when you need it to be at your best, not only for the game's sake, but for your sake. So my thought process here was not that it was about. I'm disappointed because these players should have or had the opportunity to get that next notice or that next opportunity, like Clyde, who's a fantastic pro, by the way, but it just didn't happen for them. The result, I mean, I could use all the excuses in the world, but I don't necessarily believe them. Like, one player on Montreal is bigger than our whole budget for the next 5 years. Right? One player makes more money than our whole budget for the next 5 years. But those, for me, is an excuse. It's an 11v11 game. Were we as prepared physically and technically and tactically as we should have been? Probably not. So I'll put my hand up to that. But I think that you know, it's about moments, and we didn't have the proper ideas in those moments. We didn't have the proper final finish in those moments, which, you know, are the difference in the result, but they're also the difference in between some of these players getting picked up from the CPL. Just like we're going to see in the U.S. Open Cup, a lot of those USL Championship teams players are going to get picked up. I remember I was with Rochester, 99, 98, and that team beat four MLS teams to win the U.S. Open Cup. That was Pat Onstad and Yari Olnut and Scotty Schweitzer, players that really didn't get except for Pat, obviously, didn't get a sniff in the MLS, but they proved over and over that they were at the level as individuals and as a group. I think this U.S. Open and this Canadian Championship is about that, is opening doors to not necessarily lateral movement, but movement and opportunity.
I agree. And I think you're being a little hard on yourself there. Like, you had a player get picked up from a CPL team. I think that's a win there. Shows that you prepared them well. So also talk about Rochester there. I guess we have to introduce you as a Rochester Rhino legend now, next time you come on.
Raging Rhino.
Yes.
Gotta be Raging Rhino legend.
It's sad to see what happened in that community, and John knows what it was. Soccer there, their baseball facility was filled 15,000 every game. You know, Pat Erkley and company and Eric Comides, they did an amazing job marketing that place. And it's unfortunately, they have no team anywhere now.
Thank you, Jamie Vardy. God, what a show.
Yeah, there was a bit of a mess. But what an experience playing. I played away there with Milwaukee, and I played there. Just an amazing atmosphere. What an incredible fan base. And it's too bad they didn't build on that momentum. And now it is what it is.
And Just even talking about that, like John, you're gonna get a chance now to see all these clubs now in the Open Cup, and maybe fans when they go in and watch some of these games, they'll be exposed to some of the other soccer cultures in the United States. What is a team that you think is slept on in terms of atmosphere and just the whole game day environment?
Wow. Uh, well, I mean, you've got we'll take it by divisions. Let's do it this way. USL Championship. I think if you go to the Lab in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and see something at New Mexico United, I think that that's a place. I think that if you go to Keyworth Stadium in Hamtramck, Michigan, and watch Detroit City FC, if you can get a seat, and what the folks at Detroit City did, and Detroit City has made their way through each of the divisions. They have invested in themselves, and they've worked their way up. Now they're in the second division in USL Championship. I mean, here is a group that found a deserted, beaten down, just a husk of a stadium. They invested $700,000 of their own money. The supporters invested $700,000 of their own money to renovate the stadium. And it is one of the coolest stories that has gotten out there. And if you go to Keyworth, literally, as you're watching a match on USL Championship, however you access the product, the camera from the press box, if you were to look field right past the stadium and the netting, there are trains. Literally, you have trains going north and south during the match. While the match is going on, you literally can look from the press box camera and see train traffic. I mean, it's not like commuter trains or anything like that, but it's cargo. It's cargo trains going back and forth in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. So I would say you're looking at New Mexico United. You're looking at Detroit City. I think that you're looking at probably what you're seeing in Colorado Springs, because they've now built a new downtown stadium there at Widener. I think in League One, you go to a place like Greenville. You go to a place like South Georgia Tormenta and Statesboro as they are building their own stadium. You look at a place like One Knox, Regal Stadium on the campus of the University of Tennessee. In the NPSL, you go to a place like Asheville City, which they have taken a deserted stadium and they've renovated it and they've built it, and they want to try to work their way up through divisions too. I think they're in USL League 2 this year. So there are a lot of places, and I wouldn't just pin it down to what I say. In CPL, in lower divisions in Canada, lower divisions here in the States, top division, first division soccer, whether we're talking Major League Soccer, what have you. We all have those places, and it could be college too. Those environments that always stick with us for one reason or another. Could be the town, could be the team, could be how it's embraced, could be how it's grown to a certain point. Find yours. Yes, it's great for me to come up with this travelogue, and it's great for Coach to come up with this travelogue about places and environments and things like that. But find your own, in addition to the ones that we tell you, and share it with everybody else. Don't just pin yourself into one idea as to where we should go. Always ask questions. Always, what's going on there? What's going on here? What's going on at York? Let's watch, TFC 2 at York. Do something like that. Find places where you can enjoy it yourself. And it doesn't just have to be the environment that's attached to it, but what you get to see as the game continues to grow. I think that's just as important.
Glad you mentioned that, because environments and stadiums, perfect segue here. York United sold from the Baldassara family to CSB. So we know how transparent this ownership is going to be. But Carmen, what were your thoughts when you heard the news that York United, unfortunately, is going in this direction?
Yeah, sad that they didn't get it right from the beginning. You hear those stories about investors in Detroit and people that are invested emotionally, financially, all that stuff. It's sad that we have such an amazingly what can I say? Amazingly, we have so much in New York region, and we've given back so little. So and that's the problem. We have so many financial resources. We have so many. We're 80,000 plus people playing soccer in York Region alone. And you look at how can a community fail with 80,000 probably registered players, whether it's amateur adults, whether it's record with the under fours. How could that fail? How could that not be right? And yes, you can point at the ownership a little bit and say that they've embraced the community. But I think the finger pointing should start with us, should start with the clubs, should start with the people that should have invested, not a lot, but a little. And then you could look at it. But the whole situation was started on a plan that I necessarily didn't believe in, on a roll up your sleeves and rather than earn it type mentality. And it's I hope the York region gets a chance at making this better, because we have a lot to offer, and in every sense of the word. But I think Detroit City's the way they went about things is having investors from outside, which may or may not work here. But it would be amazing for this community to give a little bit, and that's all we would need to give to make sure that this team moves forward, this organization moves forward, and then goes from there. Yeah, a lot of big discussion, but the first feeling is sad and upset, and we could have got it right so much easier, not easier, but we could have got it right in this community, that's for sure. And I hope someone still believes in this community. I hope the team stays locally. I hope we build a stadium, locally, and then we go from there.
And are you surprised, why isn't Markham or Vaughan, you have municipalities there that have over 300,000 in Markham and probably close to 200,000 in Vaughan? Shouldn't that have been the target for demographic and stadium from the start?
Yeah, it could be blueprints, preparation on how this is going to work, communication between the clubs and York 9 at the time, or York United. All that stuff there needed to be a big plan, a big picture. And we really didn't see it. I mean, this is year 5 where things should be getting better. And I think year 1 was probably the best year on and off the field. So yeah, I think that there just needed to be a blueprint, something that you could look forward to, and somewhere you could look back at and say, hey, we didn't check this box, we didn't do this, let's fix it. And that probably falls upon the ownership, that they didn't have a blueprint on how these things work. And other reasons that just fall short. But again, there's still clubs helping and supporting this club to move forward for the rest of this year at least. But it's just factioned, and it's silos, and it's right from the beginning. It was almost an environment that people didn't want to associate with, and that's sad. And our York region didn't want to associate with, and it's nice that they started this. It's nice that they brought professional soccer to the region, but where was the foresight to make this grow? And it didn't grow year by year. It became like kind of a thorn in people's side from all kinds of reasons, where they just didn't communicate with we have so many resources at the York region. One person that Tony Fonseca, who was technical director of Canada, we never embraced him. We never got him involved and him as the head of York region. A lot of situations, we could talk about this for forever, but it just we never had a picture from the beginning. And it just became off the cuff, and understandably, the Baldessar family just didn't want to lose any more money.
And John, from the outside looking in, when you hear CSB is going to be taking over, not for a long-term thing, but they're going to be looking for owners. Like, does that just signal the beginning of the end for the club, you think?
I mean, it certainly does put it on a life support kind of a notion, because it's the last thing that you want when it comes to any kind of, any kind of idea where you're talking about survival of a franchise. And to be honest, I know that a lot of folks really, truly, the perception right now of Canada soccer in general, I mean, from an administrative standpoint, when you have, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but out of the CP yesterday, when the ex-Canada soccer president was, he was asked some very pointed questions, and understandably so, over the handling of Bob Berarda. When you have Canada Soccer having to answer questions to Parliament, you're looking at a perception publicly that there are issues. And when you have any kind of corporate overlord that has issues having to take over a franchise, the level of trust is waning. And I don't know where there can be reason for optimism when it comes to any kind of a corporate involvement right now. And I think that that's why when you lose when you lose that local fabric and that local tie, especially in Canada right now, with how tenuous things are in the relationship on a national level with how things are locally, I think that it really does stretch it, and it can't be good news going forward. It really can't.
I agree. I think it's just even from like a marketing perspective, I just don't know how they're gonna make this work. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they find like an ownership group that's committed in York Region. But I think Carmen, like York Lions Stadium, like should that have been even the home from the start, or should there have been already blueprints made for anywhere in York Region to host this team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should have had a York Region Stadium. I mean, I don't know if that would have been the answer, because York Stadium is a great soccer stadium. York Lions Stadium is a great place to watch a game. It's a good venue. It's accessible. It's attractive to the York region because they don't have to go downtown to watch a game. Was the game day experience good enough? Not so sure. Did they concentrate on that game day experience to bring people back? Not so sure. Did they overspend on bells and whistles? Probably, rather than, again, I'll say it again, the game day experience. Was that the most, was that, I still think York Lions Stadium is a great venue. I don't think that was the reason why what happened. But again, we talked about the numbers in York Region, and probably to let's say break even, you would probably need 3,000 per game, maybe less, 2,000 per game paying customers. And if you're not looking internally to that, then I mean, then there's some questions that you need to ask yourself for sure. That's 2,000-3,000 per game, which it would still probably less than average of the league. So, all those things considering, we need to do a better job, selling the tickets and getting people out there and earning their support for sure.
Well, because at the same time, if you look at it from let's say I'm a prospective owner, but let's say, okay, John's a prospective owner and he wants to put something in York. I think that the relationship would have to be a two-way street, where the local government, who might understand how tenuous the relationship is to begin with about keeping a franchise there or having a franchise there would be, and because I don't know the landscape, I'm just saying that it would have to be a relationship where the individual who wants to have the franchise could work with the provincial government or the local government to sit there and say, okay, well, what about here? Can we do things here? Can we build something here? Because you know that you can have all of the studies in the world. You can sit there and say, okay, here's my environmental impact study. Here's what I think this is going to do. Here's what I think that financially, here's what it's going to do to benefit this part of Ontario. But if the government there doesn't, for whatever reason, feel like they should buy in, if they don't like the numbers, if they don't like the where, if they don't like the location, they don't like the plan, they don't like that they're not getting enough of their piece of the pie, it's not going to be a relationship that's 50-50. It's going to be tenuous. And in this day and age, I think that there are less folks who are going to want to operate and enter into a tenuous relationship. And it's like, look, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm thinking. You meet in the middle. It's not really like that these days. Sadly, when Coach and I were growing up, Giancarlo, it was that way, where you could sit there and come up with a middle ground and figure things out. Where these days, you're either going to have one side or the other sit there and go, okay, it's not benefiting me enough, or it's not benefiting us enough to a certain point, then it's off. And you have folks who, and it goes back to the Rochester situation, Coach. If sadly, Rochester was handled so poorly, where literally a month before 2 weeks before the season, I think, less than a month before the season started in MLS Next Pro, the folks who owned the Rochester franchise hung the city out to dry. Basically, they're like, nope, we can't do it. We're out.
Wow.
And so what you had was you had a league that was squared away. You had 7x4. You had 28 teams. What Rochester did was force MLS Next Pro to go back to the table and have to reorient their schedule. I mean, think about the infrastructure that had to be reorganized because one team who was an outside MLS franchise that wanted into MLS Next Pro, they weren't attached to a club. They were an independent. An independent club in Rochester, New York, RNYFC, decides, okay, yeah, Jamie Vardy, this is a great idea. Let's do this. And then because for whatever reason, 2 weeks before the season, they realize, oh, crap, we can't do it. They just bail. So MLS Next Pro, as a league, had to reorganize everything with one less franchise. Everybody that had RNYFC on their schedule had to go back to MLS Next Pro and figure out where that next matchup was coming from. The number of hurdles that RNYFC created because they didn't want to do it anymore set MLS Next Pro into a bit of a tailspin, and they had to work quickly. What you could have in New York is a situation where someone wants to come to the table. They do their due diligence. They're ready to go. But if the other side sits there and says, okay, well, you haven't done enough due diligence, then it turns into an issue. Then it turns into a discussion. And then one side or the other is just like, nope, don't want to deal with it anymore. You can't have that these days. What you want to avoid are the one and dones because it doesn't do the game any good, regardless of location. If we're talking Rochester, if we're talking York, you can't have a one and done because it doesn't do the game any good. The growth of the game matters in situations like this. And I don't think enough people understand that the growth of the game matters and that you're stunting the growth of the game when you can't come up with any kind of an agreement or any kind of element or a timetable or a plan. It's not as bad as already being at the table and saying, nope, we're out, but it's just as disappointing at the end of the day.
I agree. That's an interesting one because now you're looking at like Canada's going to host a World Cup with the United States and Mexico. They're coming off a World Cup appearance, and this is a second team that looks like it's heading down. They're not folding now, but if the numbers don't go in their favor, they could be heading down the same path as Edmonton. So that's two teams. And that's not a good look, I guess, on Canada soccer, the Canadian Premier League, after you're having the success of the national level. So, Carmen, I'll ask you on this. Like, do you think it's going to put people off in York Region from like even going towards York United, or do you think they'll maybe go in Hamilton and other areas if they know that their path to professional is going to look a lot more appealing and positive on their end?
First, I don't think that this organization will fold. I think there's going to be enough investors that are. I also think that the stadium issue. I mean, we look at Vaughan. We look at the reality of they're growing. They're still underdeveloped in most areas. If you look at the big picture, Woodbridge is getting developed. That center, city center, is getting developed. I mean, and it's slowly but surely, it's becoming a Mississauga of sorts. And there was plans to put that stadium there, but I don't think that's going to happen to the scale that's necessary for CPL. But there are other plans, and there's got to be a level of foresight and patience. If they do put that stadium at North Maple, where they're growing, there's going to be another 5,000 to 10,000 houses built there. There's going to be foresight, and there's going to be planning that needs to take place. And whether the CSA is involved or not, I think that the city, in their massive blueprint of North Maple Park or within that area, I think a stadium is definitely going to be there. Whether it's going to be what the CSA wanted as far as the digs and the hotels and everything around it, I'm not so sure. But there will be a stadium there that will be suitable for hosting CPL. Will that be the carrot? Will that be the selling point? Maybe not. But I don't think that there's going to be, or the investors that exist in the league right now are going to let this organization go. I think they've learned a lot of lessons from Edmonton. I think that the 5 to 10 year plan, or even 5-year plan in Vaughan, like that Maple or Woodbridge, that area, Richmond Hill area, is going to be conducive to. Is a conducive market to keeping a team there, we hope. And the new stadium project, when we get to the bones of everything that's happening, I think it's going to be a very valuable place to stay. So I will say that. And beyond all that, there's some owners in that league that could run the league themselves. Bob Young has his share in Halifax and has his share, obviously, with Forge. He's kind of cornering the market. If like Kerfoot is kind of doing with that whole women's league thing, there's people that want to invest in the game, and someone like Bob Young, who is a great financial prognosticator, is going to be very aware that there's at the end of the tunnel, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years, this is going to be a prosperous project. And the game is growing at incredible speed. I don't think it's, even after COVID, it's higher than it ever was. I think that investment will come to fruition, maybe not in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, maybe 10 years. But I think that the CSB realizes this, and they won't let this organization go. And I think that this market that they're in right now, with a few tweaks, is going to be very valuable to the grand scope of Canadian soccer. And there will be maybe one, maybe even 2 stadiums that are going to be viable to host a CPL organization.
And John, a final question on this topic here. We've seen in the States and a lot of MLS teams, having a lot of star athletes and celebrities as part of an ownership group has helped and added maybe to the club's presentation in some sense. Like LAFC is one that comes to mind, and around there, like I know Kevin Durant's involved in another one. So if you're York Region, let's say, there's a lot of athletes and celebrities that are in and around the area. A lot of them, even just namely Mitch Marner in the playoffs right now, York Region. do you think they should be going up to celebrities and athletes of that nature as part of an ownership group, or do you think it won't work at this level early on in the league?
I think you've got to look at it from a business perspective. I think that if you understand who those folks are, who are those young athletes that are in market that understand about good business opportunities, and there's always places that you can invest. If you want to play, as coach says, if you want to be like a Bob Young and play the long game and understand that it's about the growth of the game, the growth in a market, the growth wherever it is. I mean, we could be talking York, we could be talking, just hypothetically. I mean, it could be Whitehorse, Yellowknife, Moncton, York, wherever. If you see value in a product and you want to invest in it, today's athlete is very, very shrewd. They know what investment can mean for them along the line. Obviously, by a comparison of, say, a Kevin Durant investing in other things versus what you could see an insert Canadian athlete here who has ties to a community or wants to expand the game, you've got to find that individual who gets it. You've got to find that individual who knows about it. You've got to find that individual who loves it, not just for the investment's sake, but understands it for the love of the game and what it can do. Those individuals are out there, but it's up to you to find them through your connections. If it's Mitch Marner, great. If it's another individual, like Mitch Marner that gets it, great. But you've got to find them first, and they've got to understand that it's not just something where, we want you to be a loss leader and help us invest. We want this to be that, and that individual's not going to do it these days. It's not just throwing money away now. It's investing for the long term and finding that athlete that wants to be that individual that has ties to a community. Finding out who it is won't be the hard part. Finding that athlete who wants to understand the level of investment and what it can mean, that's the other part in all of this.
I agree. And on that note there, John, how can we follow you on social media? Get the book, everything Atlanta.
Yeah. Easiest way is on the Twitters right there at OSG Nelson. For those who are listening, right there, it's OSG Nelson on the Twitters. Soccer Down Here app available iOS and Android. On Android, you can go to the Google Store and download it. iOS, you've got to go to Spreaker, their app. Do a search for Soccer Down Here. You can also keep an eye on soccerdownhere.net for all the content, plus all of our social media channels. And if you really are interested in finding about the book number 6, right there, Noble Strong, Lessons in Destiny, right there. And there it is, Lessons in Destiny, Noble Strong. There it is. And you can go to Amazon and pick it up there. Just do an Amazon.com search for Noble Strong, Lessons in Destiny, and you can do it there, and you can pick it up, and it's all good to go.
All right, hold on, John. I don't know. I know we're on the soccer show here, but the world's a buzzing. Giancarlo wants to know, because you're never wrong. You're a Hall of Famer. The world's a buzzing. Look, see, when I say this, Carmen leaves to take a pee. All right, so look, the Maple Leafs and Tampa, Game 6.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't made it out of the first round since you were working for the Score
Exactly.
in 2004.
Thank you.
All right, get it? That rhymes. Okay, so we want to know Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Maple Leaf streak of not winning the first round over, or should Giancarlo shave his head and hope and pray that it goes to Game 7 and they may be winning a Game 7?
Oh, I think that Giancarlo should prepare the razor. I think you're going 7.
Oh, no.
I think you're going 7. I think
7.
I think Kings and Oilers are going 7. I think that Tampa and Toronto's going 7.
And he thinks wrong, because the Kings are going to lose. And which one you said? The Maple Leafs. What else?
What Maple Leafs and Tampa?
Maple Leafs, Tampa, you said 7. Kings and Oilers 7, which is wrong. And what other one? He's blacked out now. All right. So Giancarlo, I'll go to you before John returns. Who do you pick?
It's time for the Leafs to stop messing around here. We had a late game surge. I think they continue that. And I see the Leafs finally going to the second round for the first time since Matt Sundin was wearing the blue and white. So Leafs and maybe Boston again in the second round, or Florida. But
Lost.
yeah,
All right, so not that John picked the wrong team. Giancarlo picked the right team, but what does Giancarlo know? We go to the headmaster of York University, men and ladies, who's been a Maple Leaf fan. He went to the washroom to show his underwear, Maple Leaf underwear. All right, Maple Leafs Game 6. Are we going to Game 7, or do they close it out on Saturday, Carm?
I still think they're going to win it in 7. I think they're going to game.
Closing it out in 7.
Mentally, it'll be tough to overcome if they lose that. If they go to game 7, but I think that they have the wherewithal, and I think that the health of the Leafs is going to be important as well. They're healthy, and Tampa Bay is kind of walking around on one leg, but they're doing what they do. But I still think the Leafs in 7. I would hope in 6, but I still think Leafs in 7.
All right, Giancarlo, why couldn't you say this on air instead of he texting me here? Ask him if he's going to meet me at Markham Lane Saturday to watch the game between the Maple Leafs and Lightning. So go ahead,
it's going to look like Market Lane all over Toronto after the Leafs beat Tampa Bay.
All right. So also, maybe Carmen doesn't know this, but I'll close this out here. Today, it's the NFL draft yesterday, but today, even bigger, Giancarlo, even bigger, the WWE draft. John, you'll start first. Who's your first pick in the WWE draft? Is it the president of provinces of Canada? Is it Carmen Asako? Is it Giancarlo Lino? Who is it?
Who is my number 1 pick?
Yes.
My number 1 pick.
He's Googling it now. He's Googling it. I
know. No. My number 1 pick is the Bloodline.
You can't pick 5 guys. You got to pick one.
Freebird rules.
The Bloodline is breaking up tonight.
Freebird rules, by the way. I'm going Freebird rules, and I'm picking the Bloodline.
I figured that from Atlanta, GA. Giancarlo.
There's only one person to pick with the number 1 pick. It's LA Knight.
Yeah.
Talk to me. All right, Carmen, talk to me. Who's your number 1 pick? Is it Ricky Steamboat? Is it Iron Sheik? Is it Bastion Booger? Who is it? All right, it's Rick Martel. Rick Martel. He showed the hair. All right. So, Carm, I don't know if he could hear us. I don't know if he could hear us or whatever.
I think he's ignoring us now.
No, his sound went out or whatever. But there you go. John, what do you have planned this soccer weekend here for Atlanta United?
Well, it's you're in playoffs in high school right now, getting ready for the championship matches coming up next week. So we got matches that were postponed because of Mother Nature yesterday. Finish those up today. Find out all your winners on soccerdownhere.net. Then you've got Atlanta United 2 and Philadelphia Union 2 and MLS Next Pro. That is on the SDH Network on Sunday, a little before 6 o'clock. Jarrett Smith, Nick Alifi, and Jason Longshore will have the call for you there. Atlanta and Nashville, once again, the early match on Saturday afternoon. So that's going to be fun. I'd love to know who the schedule maker was. Your last week, you're playing Open Cup. You're first this week. That's clutch. Good work.
All right. And for people who we got new viewers and new listeners here, for people who don't know, check out OSG Sports and check out Soccer Down Here on Twitch Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 11:30-ish with John Freeman Nelson and the cast of in Atlanta and even in England and everything like that. You want to tell everybody about that before we close it out? Go ahead.
I already did. Before you came in.
All right. You see, I'm producing. I'm doing everything. Giancarlo Alino, who does stuff for Fired Up Network, but also works for Sportskeeda. What do you have planned for Fired Up and Sportskeeda?
Yeah, tomorrow UFC going on. It's Song Yadong, Ricky Simone. Great matchup there. Could have some future top 5 implications for the winner, moving up the rankings, but after that, TFC, it's talking about schedule makers there with MLS. Same time as a Leaf game 6, and they're playing at home. So that should be great for the attendance at BMO Field. I don't know what they're going to cap that number off. And York United going to Ottawa. So a packed Saturday.
And for those who want to know, Carmen Asako says don't bother him on the weekend. All right. For Carmen Asako, for Giancarlo Lino, and for the Hall of Famer John Freeman Nelson, this has been the Soccer Show here on the Fired Up Network, also on Mometu. Thanks a lot and enjoy